What if death was not the end, but a trial? What if eternity was not a hope, but a system, ruled by gods, enforced by kings? In ancient Egypt, life was preparation, death was judgment, and the afterlife was governed by divine law. Along the Nile, humanity built monuments not just to power, but to eternity itself. This is the story of a civilization where gods shaped the world, kings ruled as divinity, and death was only the beginning. Before there were pyramids, before there were gods carved in stone, there was only a river. Each year the Nile flooded its banks, not with destruction, but with life. As the waters retreated, they left behind dark, fertile soil, rich enough to turn desert into abundance. To the ancient Egyptians, this was no accident. It was order. Beyond the river's edge lay chaos, endless sand, unforgiving heat, a land where life could not survive. Between these two worlds, life and death, Egypt was born. Along the Nile's winding path, villages began to appear. Farmers learned its rhythms, scribes recorded its cycles, and slowly, a simple truth emerged. Whoever controlled the river controlled life itself. Around 3100 BCE, a single ruler changed Egypt forever. His name was Narmer. Ancient carvings show him wearing two crowns, one of Upper Egypt and one of Lower Egypt. With conquest and ceremony, Narmer united the river's length under one rule. For the first time, Egypt became a single kingdom. But Narmer was more than a king. He was believed to be chosen by the gods, a living bridge between heaven and earth. From this moment on, Egyptian rulers would not merely govern, they would embody order itself. The pharaoh was Horus on earth, guardian of balance, keeper of Ma'at. As long as the king ruled justly, the river would flood, the crops would grow, and the world would remain in harmony. This belief shaped everything that followed, a civilization built not on chance, but on cosmic balance. And soon, that belief would be carved into stone, on a scale the world had never seen. To preserve order forever, Egypt would attempt the impossible. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end. It was a transition. They believed that life continued beyond the grave, not as a shadow, but as a continuation of existence itself. The body would perish, but the soul could endure, if it was preserved. To achieve this, Egypt invented something entirely new: immortality through stone. During the Old Kingdom, the pharaohs turned their gaze toward eternity. They were no longer content with simple tombs beneath the earth. They would rise above it. On the edge of the desert, where fertile land met the realm of the dead, construction began on monuments unlike anything the world had seen: the pyramids. The greatest of them all was built for a king named Khufu. The Great Pyramid of Giza rose more than 140 meters into the sky. It was assembled from over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, cut, transported, and placed with astonishing precision. This was not chaos. This was mathematics. Every angle, every alignment, every corridor was calculated with care. The pyramid's sides aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. Its chambers were positioned to guide the soul toward the heavens. To the Egyptians, this structure was not merely a tomb, it was a machine for resurrection. Inside, the pharaoh's body was preserved through mummification, a ritual of oils, linen, and sacred words. His organs were removed and protected. His name was inscribed so it could never be forgotten, because to be forgotten was to die a second death. Beside the pyramids, another guardian watched in silence. Carved directly from the living rock, the great Sphinx gazed east toward the rising sun. With the body of a lion and the face of a king, it embodied strength, vigilance, and divine authority. To those who stood before it, the message was clear. The pharaoh was not only a ruler of men, he was a force of cosmic order.
Yet these monuments came at a cost.
Tens of thousands labored under the sun, quarrying stone, hauling blocks, shaping eternity with their hands. Whole generations gave their lives to a future they would never see. But in Egypt, this sacrifice was not questioned. To build for eternity was to participate in the divine plan. As long as the pyramid stood, as long as the king endured beyond death, the balance of the world would remain intact. Egypt had attempted the impossible. They had tried to defeat time itself, but eternity did not belong to stone alone. It belonged to the gods. To understand ancient Egypt, one must look beyond stone and into the divine. The Egyptians did not see their gods as distant beings. They were forces woven into the fabric of the world, present in the sun, the river, the sky, and the soil beneath their feet. At the center of this universe was Ra, the sun god. Each morning he rose in his solar boat, bringing light and life to the land. Each night he journeyed through the underworld, battling chaos so the sun could rise again. In this endless cycle, the Egyptians saw the promise of rebirth. But it was Osiris who ruled over death itself. Once a king of the living, Osiris was murdered, dismembered, and cast into darkness. Through devotion and magic, he was restored, not to life, but to eternal rule over the afterlife. Osiris became the judge of the dead. Before him, every soul would stand in judgment. The heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of truth. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it was devoured, and the soul was erased forever. But if it was light, the soul would pass into eternity. Guiding the dead on this journey was Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification. He protected the body, oversaw burial rituals, and ensured the soul's safe passage beyond death. And standing between gods and men was Horus. Horus, the falcon god, represented kingship itself. Every pharaoh was believed to be Horus incarnate, ruling the living world in divine order. At death, the pharaoh became Osiris, joining the gods beyond the veil. Binding this entire system together was a single sacred principle: Ma'at. Ma'at was truth, balance, and harmony. It governed the movement of stars, the flooding of the Nile, and the justice of kings. As long as Ma'at was upheld, the world remained stable. When it was broken, chaos followed. This belief shaped every aspect of Egyptian life. Temples were built to sustain the gods, rituals were performed to maintain cosmic balance, and monuments were raised to ensure that order would never fade. The gods were not myths. They were the architecture of reality itself. But even divine order can fracture.
For centuries, Egypt believed its world was eternal. The gods were in balance. The Nile rose on time. The pharaoh ruled as Horus on earth. But order is not permanent. As generations passed, the bond between gods and kings began to strain. The pyramids still stood, vast and immovable, but the power that built them was weakening. Around 2180 BCE, the Old Kingdom collapsed. The Nile failed to flood. Harvests shrank. Famine spread across the land. Provincial governors grew powerful, ruling as kings in all but name. The pharaoh's voice no longer carried across Egypt. Temples lost authority. Ma'at, the sacred balance, began to fracture.
Ancient texts speak of chaos. The poor have become rich. The rich have become poor. Tombs were robbed. Monuments were abandoned. The certainty of eternal order faded into doubt. This was the first intermediate period, a time the Egyptians remembered as an age of disorder, suffering, and fear. Yet Egypt did not disappear. Slowly, from the south, new rulers emerged, kings who spoke not of divine perfection, but of responsibility. By 2050 BCE, Egypt was reunified under Mentuhotep II. The Middle Kingdom was born. This time, kings ruled differently. They presented themselves not as distant gods, but as shepherds of their people, protectors of justice, guardians of Ma'at. Literature flourished. Stories, prayers, and moral teachings appeared, not only for kings, but for common people. The afterlife was no longer reserved for pharaohs alone. Eternity was promised to many.
Egypt had learned something new. That order must be maintained. That the gods did not guarantee stability. That power required wisdom. For a time, balance returned. But beyond Egypt's borders, new forces were gathering. From the northeast came foreign rulers, the Hyksos. They brought horses, chariots, and new weapons. They ruled parts of Egypt, shattering the illusion of invincibility. Egypt had been humbled, and from that humiliation, something dangerous was born. A kingdom no longer content to endure.
Egypt had learned a painful lesson. The world beyond its borders was not empty. It was dangerous. Foreign rulers had once sat on Egyptian thrones. Their weapons had outmatched Egypt's own. Their chariots had rolled across sacred soil. This humiliation would not be forgotten. From Thebes rose a new line of kings, rulers hardened by loss, determined never again to bow to outsiders. Among them was Ahmose I. Around 1550 BCE, Ahmose launched a campaign to reclaim Egypt. He reorganized the army. He adopted the very weapons once used against his people: horses, chariots, composite bows. Battle by battle, the Hyksos were driven north. Their strongholds fell. Their rule collapsed. Egypt was whole again. But unity was no longer enough. Beyond Egypt's borders lay rivals, threats, and wealth. And Egypt would not wait to be invaded again. The new kingdom was born. For the first time, Egypt became an empire. Its armies marched into Nubia, securing gold and resources. They pushed into the Levant, establishing control over trade routes and city-states. Tribute flowed into Egypt. Gold, timber, incense, and captives filled its temples and treasuries. The pharaoh was no longer only a guardian of Ma'at.
He was a warrior king. Yet empire demanded more than force. To rule vast lands, Egypt needed administration, diplomacy, and spectacle. Vassal kings bowed before the pharaoh. Foreign princes were raised at the Egyptian court. Monuments rose not only as tombs, but as warnings. Egypt now projected power. Its gods marched with its armies. Its banners flew beyond the Nile. What had once been a wounded kingdom had transformed itself from victim to empire. And at the height of this empire, Egypt would dare to challenge the gods themselves. At the height of its empire, Egypt stood unrivaled. Gold flowed into its temples. Foreign kings bowed before its pharaohs. The gods had never seemed stronger. And yet, from within this confidence came a rupture. Around 1353 BCE, a pharaoh dared to change everything. His name was Akhenaten. Akhenaten rejected the ancient gods. He closed their temples. He erased their names from stone. In their place, he elevated a single deity, the Aten, the sun disk, a god without form, without myth, without priesthood. For the first time in Egypt's long history, the universe was reduced to one divine light. Akhenaten moved the capital away from Thebes. He built a new city, Akhetaten, dedicated entirely to his vision. Art changed, religion changed, even the pharaoh's image became strange and unfamiliar. But Egypt did not follow. The old gods had shaped daily life for millennia. They governed birth and death, harvest and justice. They were too deeply woven into the world to be erased by decree. When Akhenaten died, his revolution died with him. His successor was a boy, Tutankhamun. Under Tutankhamun, the old gods returned. Temples reopened. Priests reclaimed their power. The name of the Aten faded from public memory. Tutankhamun ruled briefly and died young. But in death, he would become immortal. In 1922, his tomb was discovered, sealed, untouched, overflowing with gold. Masks, thrones, chariots, and amulets lay exactly as they had been placed more than 3,000 years earlier. To the modern world, Tutankhamun became the face of ancient Egypt, a reminder of unimaginable wealth and the obsession with eternity. After him came kings who ruled not as heretics, but as titans. Among them stood Ramses II. Ramses ruled for 66 years. He fought wars against the Hittites. He signed one of the world's earliest known peace treaties, and across Egypt, he carved his name into stone. Colossal statues rose in his image. Temples like Abu Simbel were cut directly from living rock, faces turned toward the sun. Ramses did not merely rule Egypt, he performed power. Under his reign, Egypt projected strength, confidence, and divine favor. But even monuments cannot stop time. After Ramses, the empire slowly weakened. Rivals grew stronger, trade routes shifted, internal divisions returned. The gods remained, but the world was changing. And in time, Egypt would face a final ruler, one who ruled not as a god, but as a legend. For centuries, Egypt endured. Empires rose and fell beyond its borders. Yet along the Nile, temples still stood. Priests still spoke ancient names, and the gods still watched from stone. But the world was changing. New powers pressed in from every direction. Assyrians, Persians, Greeks. Each conquest left Egypt diminished, but not erased. In 332 BCE, a young Macedonian king entered Egypt without a battle. His name was Alexander. The Egyptians welcomed him as a liberator. He honored their gods. He was crowned pharaoh. And in his name, a new city was founded, Alexandria. After Alexander's death, Egypt passed to one of his generals, Ptolemy. A Greek dynasty now ruled the land of the pyramids. Egyptian rituals continued. Temples remained active. But the pharaohs now spoke Greek, not Egyptian. The old world endured beneath a foreign crown.
Nearly 3 centuries later, a final ruler rose to power. Her name was Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was not Egyptian by blood, but she understood Egypt better than any ruler before her. She spoke the ancient language. She embraced the gods. She presented herself as Isis reborn. But Cleopatra ruled in a world no longer shaped by myth. Rome now commanded the Mediterranean. Power belonged not to gods, but to legions. Cleopatra allied herself first with Julius Caesar, then with Mark Antony. Together they challenged Rome's future. In 31 BCE, their fleets met at the Battle of Actium. They were defeated. One by one, Cleopatra's allies fell. Her kingdom collapsed. And in 30 BCE, she chose death over capture. With her death, Egypt became a Roman province. The temples would slowly close. The ancient rituals would fade. The gods who had ruled for 3,000 years would fall silent. Yet Egypt did not vanish. Its monuments remained. Its stories endured. Its ideas shaped religion, science, and civilization far beyond the Nile. Egypt had dreamed of eternity, and in stone, belief, and memory, it found it. And though the gods have fallen silent, their world still speaks to us. Egypt did not survive because of armies. It did not endure because of kings. Egypt survived because it understood something rare, that civilization is not measured only in power, but in memory. Its monuments were not built merely to impress the living. They were built to speak to the future. The pyramids still rise against the sky, not as ruins, but as statements. They tell us that humans once believed time could be challenged, death could be negotiated, and eternity could be engineered. Egypt's gods may have fallen silent, but their ideas live on. Judgment after death, moral balance, life as a preparation for what comes next. These beliefs crossed borders, shaped religions, and echoed through millennia. Even today, Egypt shapes how we imagine the ancient world. When we think of pharaohs, we think of divine kings. When we think of the afterlife, we think of judgment and rebirth. When we think of eternity, we think of stone reaching toward the sky. Egypt never vanished. It transformed into story, into symbol, into legacy. And through reconstruction, imagination, and memory, we can still walk its streets, stand beneath its monuments, and hear the echoes of a civilization that refused to be forgotten. This was ancient Egypt, not just a kingdom, not just a myth, but a vision
of eternity. History is not gone. It is waiting to be seen again. But Egypt was not the end of the ancient world. As its gods fell silent, a new power rose in the West. An empire that would absorb Egypt, reshape the world, and redefine what civilization meant. Next time, Ancient Rome.